Men rising up to end the silence around us about the chains that bind us, to dispel the darkness of illusion with luminous spiritual technologies, to finally become the hero within us all. This is episode 37 of Arise, the Honest Man's podcast. I'm Karuna Avatar Das, and my dear beloved co-host Jai Jagannath Prabhu is with me. And we also have our very dear friend, Deva Madhava Prabhu. He is the founder of Bodhaka, and he has joined us for numerous episodes in the past. We always deeply cherish his very sober, grounded, well-articulated perspective on absolutely everything. And yeah, we're just really honored to have him with us for this novel discussion. We haven't entered into this domain of our story and our motivations and reasons for doing what we're doing, and it is certainly a timely conversation at this juncture. We have been having some pretty, you could say, out there conversations, speaking about contentious subject matters. The majority of people have been very touched and very appreciative for opening up the conversation, but we have also been there have been some naysayers and, let's say, constructive criticism. So that is what we're here to do today. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hi.
Thanks for having me. If it wasn't you guys and we weren't getting to talk about this, I would have not come. Yes, we got a lot going on here. I love being with you all, and this is an exciting thing to discuss.
Well, thank you for obliging. I mean, we weren't the only ones getting comments of, well, we'll just say constructive criticism. You were also getting some of that constructive criticism when I reached out to you. You mentioned that to me. Yeah. So it does seem like a very well-timed discussion to have this discussion. We called it "You're Condoning Sex." It was purposely put in sarcastic remarks. The reason for that is me, because my initial reaction to hearing this was like, are we literally 5 years old? Like, why are we calling, GBCs or gurus and like tattletelling? Aren't we adults? Like, we can talk about whatever we want. This is our podcast. We can do whatever we want. If we want to talk about toes, we can talk about toes. Like get off. That was like obviously just like false ego reaction energy. And so I stepped back after I let myself go through that feeling and full authenticity. Then I like stepped back and I'm like, okay, this seems like a good time to talk about this. Also, honestly, Karuna and Avatar and I, we haven't had too many discussions about like what our brand is and how we want to develop it over the year. Sorry, there's like a little echo. Are you hearing that?
Maybe if I mute myself, then
I don't know. We hadn't had a lot of time to discuss our own brand and how we want to develop it. Our kind of first objective was to see if we could do it. Like doing something consistently, like a podcast also, even though it's only once a week, is extremely difficult. I know a lot of podcasts started at the beginning of 2020 and hardly any of them survived. So it's like hard work. Like we're not always there emotionally. Karuna, Avatar, and I can tell you many weeks we come, and before we do the podcast, it's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. Why am I doing this? This is too much. I'm overwhelmed, X, Y, Z. And then after we do the podcast, it's like, wow, that was wonderful. It was uplifting and all of that.
Every time.
It's like very consistent thing. So it's not an easy thing to do this. So our first motivation, not for the year, is like, could we just stick to it? And then we were like, we'll come together and look at how we want to develop it if we're going to, continue it further. But it just seems like a well-timed thing because of the subject matters in the last few episodes, particularly triggered a lot of people who have, I'm going to say, a more maybe orthodox way of looking at certain issues. And they were kind of triggered. So it's like, okay, maybe we can just have this conversation with people who hear and appreciate the podcast, hear the constructive criticism, hear the constructive appreciations also. We're totally open for that. And take the notes from that and develop our brand a little bit more precisely. That's the motivation, inspiration for this particular episode. What I would like to start off with is our first motivations for doing a Rise to Honest Man podcast? What were our first motivations for doing this
Mm.
episode? Like particularly Karuna, Avatar, and I, but also Deva Madhava Prabhu for like, I want this show to be on Bodhaka. You're the inspiration behind Bodhaka. So what were our first motivations? I'm going to start there. And honestly, I'm going to open this up too, because I have 3 solid points that I want to get off my chest immediately. So I'm going to do a little bit more talking. Here, I just like to say the first reason I reached out to Karuna Avatar to do this particular show. Maybe the reasons for that we can get into later, but the reason I reached out to him, well, the reason I was inspired for this sort of show, my first reason was that I have some sort of energy where people feel that they can confide in me. I don't know what it is. I've had it even before I was a devotee, after a devotee also. I have this energy where people confide in me, like literally people I don't even know or don't know well at all. They would confide in me about very personal, very kind of embarrassing and vulnerable things. When it came to man confiding in me, a lot of the issues centered around sexual melees and dysfunction, which is probably a huge issue facing men and women today, but especially men in a pornified world. Especially when they come to spirituality, it gets all the more complicated because you have these high ideals, and something like sexual dysfunction, especially that indulges porn, for example, is just so far away from the ideal that it's very embarrassing to talk about. Tons of men will come to me with these issues, like very plainly, yo, Jai, or they wouldn't even, I'm like, do I know you? They like, no, you don't know me, but I don't know. I feel like I can trust you. And they would confide in me about their sexual melees and dysfunction.
To be fair, though, you were also at a certain point in time, like, very much looking for that kind of thing. I mean, when was it, 2019? And you were going around Radhadesh being like, yo, do you watch porn?
Well, yeah, so that, just a little background on that. That was the result of so many men coming to me, confiding.
Right.
And it became, like, when I was in the ashram, I was strict as anything. Like, I wouldn't even do bad stuff in my dreams. That's how strict I was. Like, that solid. And when I came out into, like, the more conventional world, and then all these devotee men specifically were coming up to me, sharing like, hey, I'm struggling with porn. That was like one of the main things that was always coming up. And so I started to like explore men's issues more after that. Like, it never even occurred to me that that's something that should be explored. Like, even on a personal level, it didn't occur to me. But when this was happening, I was like, okay, let me explore this more. And then I wanted to get my own research. It was like a very simple exercise, or you could say very simple data collection. I was going up to people and straight up asking them, do you watch porn? Like, without any context, without any, like, it didn't exactly fit in the conversation. It would just be like totally random. And people would be like, you know when you have that like look where you've been busted and you don't have enough time to like articulate a lie. So that was happening a lot. So I was like, okay, this is really an issue for our community, it seems, and something that probably would be healthy if we explored it more plainly and openly. So that was my first motivation, like so many people confiding and knowing that this is a hard thing to do. So if we had a show or some public space where we were talking about it plainly, that will serve as a sort of sucker. Am I saying that right? SUCCOR, sucker. Okay, I'm ghetto. I don't. It's a word like a palliative for the heart. Like, wow, I'm not the only one struggling with this. It's like a real issue, and thank you, someone's actually giving voice to that. That was the first motivation. My second motivation was kind of like to have a show about that kind of focuses on upbuilding men and the face of a culture that says like we're toxic, we're rapists, we're dangerous, and the only viable sort of expression of manhood is when it's like in total subordination to like a woman, for example. Like, that's been like kind of the strong message that I've seen coming into the culture. Like, I'm talking about when you look at social media or like the things that are thrust in the mainstream psyche is not for upbuilding like a healthy manhood. It's a constant reinforcing in the ways of which we are problematic. So that's pretty demoralizing. I may have low-key saw the Black Widow movie, low-key. I'm a devotee, so we don't really do those things. I may have low-key saw it. And there were only 3 men in the movie. Naturally, it was about women's strength and empowerment. And of course, their strength and empowerment comes when they can perform the function of a man, effectively, like killing people. Anyway, that's neither here or there. But they only had three men in the movie. The first man was kind of like, he was a weapons dealer, but he was kind of shown as somewhat incompetent. Like he was kind of ridiculed by the protagonist in the movie, and it was clearly like a loving dealing, but he was ridiculed. That's the first man, and he's like the most positive image of manhood in the movie. The second male character was like her fake father, who was a complete buffoon. We'll just leave it at that. And the third character was the antagonist in the movie, whose main talking point was that he wanted to create an army out of the only resource that the world has too much of, which is women. And I was like, oh my God, dude. I just wanted to be entertained in my depression. I didn't want to like have all these politics like thrust on me like this, you know? So it was just like, why all the time they're presenting an image of the demoralized man and like reinforcing it. So I thought we need to have conversations that tell man that, you know what, you're good. You're actually very good, but you've not learned how to integrate some of these energies within you. And you need to learn how to do that. And we need to learn how to do that. And let's kind of have an open conversation about how we might do that so that we could be better for ourselves at least, and then for our families and our world and all that. That's my second reason. I have more on that, but I'm just, because I'm already talking a lot. My third reason, as the young people say, no tea, no shade. But the third reason is whenever, at least in the popular mainstream culture, whenever women complain about women's issues, they largely center around men not showing up in ways that they should be showing up, that's not toxic and not abusive and so on. So I was like, well, if all the women's issues, like all the issues that we hear complained about are largely centered on men, like, and even when you have podcasts, okay, again, no tea, no shade, but y'all know I had posted, y'all remember this thing that went around in our community about this one powerful preacher calling a girl Mataji, and she was like, don't call me Mataji. He was like, nope, Mataji. And so there was a little bit of thing going on with that. So I shared the post that a friend sent, a letter that a friend sent me, not glorifying, but making a case for why he thinks calling women Mataji is good. So I shared that, saying that I appreciate this perspective too. It wasn't exactly like that's my perspective, but I appreciate this angle too. So I shared it on my page. I didn't know what type of drama that was going to cause. That was literally the most commented upon post that I ever had on Facebook. It had like over 200 comments. Like it was like a wildfire broke out. And one of the participants in that, we'll call it a discussion, but we know what it actually is. Just, you know, a wildfire. She decided, wonderful devotee, I assume, I don't know her, but from that exchanges that were taking place on that thread, she decided that she was going to start a podcast, the Off the Altar podcast, which was kind of like a direct response to some of the things that were being said on there, which were perhaps toxic. Like I wouldn't even deny that, because you can't control who's commenting on the thread. So many things were coming. So kind of as a direct response to that, she was inspired to start this podcast, the Off the Altar podcast. So I saw, like, just in that, a lot of the energy that women bring to the table when describing their issues center around men's failure to show up. So that means the problem is still largely with men, and that we are going to have to work on ourselves. Like it's a man's issue, so we got to work on it. So for that, those three reasons were my initial inspirations for this sort of show that we're doing. And this is, anyway, I'm gonna pause there, and I'm happy. I wanted to get that off my chest because John V has shared the question, like, why did you call it the Men's Podcast? So this is what's going on in my head, kind of as a partial response to that particular question.
But we'll deal with that question again a little bit more extensively a little bit later on. I would just like to hear from Deva Madhava Prabhu now, perhaps a little bit about the inspiration behind Bodhaka, since Bodhaka is the platform which is hosting us, has been from the beginning, and just to get a sense of how he envisioned the purpose of this platform. Oh, you're still muted, Prabhu.
Rookie mistake, my bad. A year and a half and I still can't do these podcasts. First, my own jaw kind of hit the floor when you said this is the 37th episode of Arise. I was like, hell yeah, boys. That's so difficult. Really, like, that's so difficult. Anyone that has ever tried to do anything consistently understands what it takes. And you guys have been showing up. So Jai, mentioned earlier why this Arise show on Bodhaka. And really it's because of Jai. And then when I met you, Karuna, who I didn't have much of a relationship with you before, but we met through our Bhagavatam Sangha. And I thought you were the perfect foil to Jai's presence and the sagacity he brings. And you bring an honesty and a gregariousness that's really authentic. You're not like a ham about it. You're not trying to work the audience. You're just naturally gregarious and effusive like that. And it's the perfect, like we got a great Oreo going on here, you and Jai. You don't even need the other piece of the cookie. It's just nice. So I was very excited and hopeful that it would be something that could move forward, because I know so many young men over here in North America and really over the world that have benefited from Jai's association. And I wanted to offer that. And I knew that he knew a lot of other good devotees who would also be able to come on and bring their wisdom, bring their value. And that's just been the case over and over and over again. And I've gotten, it's like at least 24 messages by now, memorable messages of people like earnestly saying, this has saved my life. This has changed my idea of Krishna consciousness. This has rejuvenated my faith in the movement, my faith in Krishna, my faith in Prabhupada. And that's what we wanted from Bodhaka as an experience in general, because the community and the idea of what it means to be Krishna conscious has become very stereotyped and anchored to institutional ideas of Krishna consciousness. And it's a painful irony to witness, because Krishna consciousness is meant to be something spontaneous, voluntary, exciting, inspired. And so to, shackle it really to these institutional tropes, which have their purpose, but not often serving the ultimate end of the soul practicing Krishna consciousness, is really sad and tragic. And so I wanted to create a platform at our community in Ypsilanti. We have the Harmony Collective, and we've been trying. Jai was a recent visitor.
I just want to say I love that community. It's special. I'm just throwing that out there.
We'll be more special if you come back more often. So I look forward to it. But we noticed when devotees would come to our little community, where we have this ethos of chant and be honest, right? Just come as you are, say what really is happening in your Krishna conscious life, and through hearing and chanting with other people that you can trust, you'll get through that. That's our approach. And don't be scared to let us know like where you are right now, because we're not going to kick you out or shun you or shame you. If you do, we noticed that when devotees would come into that atmosphere, it would really help them. And they'd be kind of sad to go back to whatever atmosphere they were going to. So I wanted to extend that experience to the whole Vaishnav community as far as we can, because that's what the Vaishnav community is meant to be about. We're not inventing or making up something here. We're trying to create the sadhava sangha that's meant to be experienced. Prabhupada translates this word many times in the Bhagavatam, the sadhava, as the thoroughly honest person. But if I'm not allowed to be thoroughly honest until I'm a pure devotee, then how am I ever going to get to the platform of pure devotion through hearing and chanting if I have to hide myself behind a veneer of institutional, pandering to survive the decades in Krishna consciousness? So this Bodhaka platform was inspired to be a place where, and Krishna Kishore is making a nice statement here, Bodhaka as an umbrella of all the different types of bhakti that are happening all over the planet, for the men and the women and the rich and the poor and the blacks and the whites and the Indians and the young and the old. There's so many different beautiful and variegated expressions of what it means to serve Krishna with sincerity, what it means to take shelter of the sadhus with sincerity. And it's tragic that when anyone thinks of a Hare Krishna, they basically still see someone in bed sheets with a shaved head. it's the greatest crime against humanity right now. And that humanity doesn't know that is part of why it's the greatest crime against humanity. So doing our small part to liberate that very harmful conception of what it means to be Krishna conscious is what this platform is meant for. So in doing that, then also we have to get into the things that everyone else doesn't want to get into. And they talk about behind closed doors and behind people's backs and everywhere else, except in a healthy, responsible way. And so that's why we're doing it in public. That's why we're doing it in front of people. Yeah, bring us your criticism, bring us your concern, but also be able to speak to the points that we're making about why these conversations are valuable. Because I think the evidence, the proof is in the pudding, as certain devotees would say it, that on the whole, the experience of this honest conversation that we're having is appreciated and wanted more and more.
Absolutely. So well stated, Prabhu. Thank you so much for that input. And
little heavy about that. The greatest crime against humanity. Like, it's like, where's my tea at?
my Guru Maharaj, he said, if it can't go everywhere and it isn't for everyone, I'm not interested.
Wow.
That's Krishna consciousness. It has to be for everyone everywhere, and simultaneously it has to be personal. And so this is a nuance that we have to somehow navigate. And right now the society is failing, but it doesn't have to. There's kind of an underground railroad, that's how I term it, in the Krishna consciousness movement. There's so many, my ISKCON community is exactly how I would want it to be. But then I see so many people living in this other space, which is very difficult and harassed. And so we're just trying to, we want to ruffle feathers. We're happy to be upsetting some people. It's good.
It's required.
It's required. Right. Sorry, somebody's phone is ringing.
Okay, you can mute.
No problem. Okay, and then just very briefly from my side, I feel like Jai has really captured the essence of it in the introductory part of what he'd said. But for me, I think the reason that I'm here is, firstly, as a young man growing up in this world and trying to be a devotee, I have a multitude of struggles, things that are very difficult to deal with, and I kind of had a sense that if something is very real for me, in all probability, it's also very real for a lot of other people. And what is, we had one of our dear guests, Damodar Prasad. He made this really great statement on one of our shows that whatever is most personal is most universal. And then also our dear friend Kelly Kanana, him and I did a little spoken word piece together once, and one of his lines in our piece was, "Whatever is true for me is true for you reliably." So just to put it in some slightly different words, and I figured, well, there's a lot of things that I'd like to know more about how to be a better man and how to be a better devotee. And I'm going to try and co-create a podcast that is exactly the kind of podcast that I would like to listen to, that would be helpful to me. And so I feel like that's kind of, I guess, my contribution. And then I've also kind of had this characteristic always where I almost have like an involuntary manifestation of vulnerability and honesty of mind that takes place, where I just really struggle to not say what I feel, and it has appalled some people, but in most cases I've found it actually to be very helpful, because people are really, really afraid of being judged and speaking their minds, but there is simply no other way to lead a meaningful and fulfilling life than to be fully authentic and to be fully yourself. And I kind of see it as a bit of a personal mission to eradicate unnecessary inauthenticity wherever I go. So that's what I wish to bring to this space, to be genuine about where we are. And as Jai recently coined this great phrase, owning your journey. Just lastly, I'll just also briefly say, I kind of articulated it in these words, and I'd like to share that now. Embracing where you're at, being there as consciously and wholesomely as possible, regardless of how well you're measuring up to the ultimate standards of sincerity and purity, whilst continuously cultivating a desire and determination to attain the ideal. So yes, that is the core of what I'd like to contribute right now. Where are we going next, Jai?
I want to go to, how do we see ourselves now? Like in terms of what's actually manifested. That's where we're going to go. I just want to say I did not coin the term "own your journey." I picked it up from an MMA YouTube channel that I watched when I was exploring learning martial arts pre-lockdown. So just putting that out there. I would like to take credit for it, but it's not my term. But I resonate with it very deeply, especially these days. So I was using it quite a bit. Yeah, how do we see ourselves now? I know for myself, like what's ended up happening with the episodes. Well, and I think this is our intention, was to at least catalyze uncomfortable conversations that could be embarrassing, but that were like thoroughly honest. And in order to do that, you have to invite guests on who would have the courage to do that, and who would also have the courage to say what was on their mind genuinely without feeling that they will be judged or shamed by it, at least from the guests themselves. And originally, like our very first episode was called "Am I a Bad Yogi Because I Like Porn?" which was like perfect clickbaity title. It was a great opening sort of show that we did. It was a super good episode. And then after that, I remember telling Karuna Avatar, like, let's not focus too much around the sound.
Whoops.
Your mic's going funny, Jai.
It went mute suddenly. Oh, no.
We can hear you now.
Yeah, but somehow the quality has dissipated. That's okay. Okay, we'll just give Jai a moment there. Jai, you can keep... I don't know if it would be possible for you to multitask, but we can still hear you, so you can keep talking if that's possible for you right now.
Can you? I can't hear anyone all of a sudden.
We can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I can't hear anyone, so I'm going to say my spiel, and then I'm going to click off, and then come back on. So, yeah, our first episode was like, am I a bad yogi because I like porn? And then we kind of steered away from just sexually centered subject matters because we didn't want people to think that we were only concerned about issues surrounding sex, even though that did make up some of the, let's say, a third of the motivation, that sexual melees and dysfunction is a major issue facing men today in general. Our movement has got plenty of examples of that, but we don't want people to think that that's our primary focus. So we kind of steered for many episodes on other things that kind of just help to give insight into the inner life of a man, of people in general. That's why a lot of those topics are universal. We got that comment. It seems like the topics aren't necessarily particularly to men. That is true because they're dealing with the inner life, and the inner life in a lot of ways works according to a lot of uniform patterns. But we wanted to make sure that the content that we were putting out did have that sense, like it was multifaceted. It wasn't just like sex focused. But then what happened is our last 3 episodes, well, we did 2 with one Nakula and 1 with Abhimanyu. And where there was a strong sex positivity approach to a very sensitive subject matter, and which is why we got some of the responses that we did. After putting all these episodes together, we were like, let's return to the sex issue, because that's one of the, a third of the inspiration for starting this podcast, and that's an important issue for a lot of men. Let's turn to the sex issue again. And that's not presented as just solely in a Vedantic manner where it's like something to be embarrassed about or ashamed of. We didn't realize that our guests would be like, kind of like, yo, sex is great, you know, but although I didn't realize that, and I don't necessarily agree with that per se, I loved that he felt empowered and encouraged to say that plainly without advocating that this was a uniform standard to be followed by everyone, but to say like, hey, I'm an initiated devotee, but I realize where I'm standing on the way to my, you know, my own journey towards ultimate beatitude. And I'm not embarrassed about that. And I'm not ashamed to announce it to the world also. I was like, that's beautiful. And it turns out that people loved him. This is not Srila Prabhupada. People love, like, they responded so well to that. I remember sending the episode to some of our little WhatsApp group that I'm in. And in this WhatsApp group, you know, we're an opinionated bunch. So we always got something for someone. And I remember when I sent the episode with Nakula, you know, there was like a large skepticism around him. And then afterwards, the main feedback that I was getting was that I don't know if I agree with him, but I just love that there was no pretense. And he just, you know, he just won another fan. That was the main response I was getting about it. It was just like, I'm announcing to the world that this is where I'm at. I'm not embarrassed about it. And I thought that was just like a very powerful episode. And it turned out to be a very powerful episode because we did a workshop with him afterwards, and the response was like amazing. So many more men stepped up, not only to like our Rise stuff, but also to his stuff, feeling just very encouraged that there was someone who can meet them where they're at and help them to come into integrity where they're at so they could take the step that's right in front of them, even if that particular step isn't yet the standard that I say a more orthodox way of thinking about it would be. So I kind of see our responsibility now as just hosting conversations like that where people can speak without pretense, even if they're presenting something that's not, you know, quote unquote bona fide. Like, I wanted to say this before I forget. I kind of view us I don't view us as doing a Hare Krishna podcast. Like, this isn't a Hare Krishna podcast to me. I'm hoping that in the future, and we have plans for this in our second year, to spread it out to just more men who have a more spiritual orientation to life. I said we're a bunch of Hare Krishnas doing a podcast about men, you know, and about men's issues. But we're not necessarily trying to present Hare Krishna Siddhanta in every single episode. You know, and so when people like come with this energy, like, that's not what Prabhupada said. And I'm like, you think we don't get that? Like, girl, I've been around for 20 years. I get that. I know what's up with this, you know, but we need to figure out how we're going to integrate the different energies that are holding us back from where we're standing right now. And I'm going to maybe bring this up in the future. I'm going to note it down now, but one question that we have to deal with, and I know this is going to be a really uncomfortable question. I probably shouldn't even say it, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Say it.
When a lot of people who would like reach out with constructive criticism, particularly about this not being bona fide, this and so on, I have the question, and this is a genuine question. I'm not even being facetious or catty or sassy or anything. This is a genuine question. What has following the Acharya done for you practically? It's one of those uncomfortable questions that we don't like to ask ourselves because the implication is a little revealing, either to our application of the process, or I think I suggest or I intuit that we might not want to deal with that question because it may bring doubt to the efficacy of the process itself. And so people don't want to touch that. So instead of just like dealing with that energy yourself, like asking that very uncomfortable question to yourself, like what have I actually gained? I know we have gratitude exercises and journals that we do so we don't get into this negative space, but I'm talking about on a very like visceral level. Like, what have I really gained or integrated from the Guru Varg? You know, before I go out and just like smash someone for having something that's not bona fide, but that's helped them to integrate their energies in a healthy way. Before I just simply dismiss that, maybe I need to deal with this question first, because saying that this is the path is not the same as embodying it, honestly. And maybe that's something that we have to deal with ourselves before we go out and just start criticizing. Oh, he's doing psychedelics. He's bogus. Oh, he's doing that thing. He's bogus. That one's bogus. It's like, okay, well, what are you getting from, other than that bad attitude? What are you getting from, following this thing? And so, yeah, that's how I see ourselves now, as just instigating uncomfortable conversations with people who are prepared to talk without pretense. Even if we don't necessarily agree, we would like to have other guests on here who aren't devotees, but who deal with the field of like man's psychology and different things like that. That's something to look forward to in the future.
Yeah.
That's what I want to say there. Okay, I'm sorry for talking so much.
I just, brief addition
I'm going to click
here.
out really quick because I can't hear you.
You do that. Nice. Okay, I'm indicating. Oh, okay, he's left. He's coming back. Okay, just some quick addition to what Jai just said. We're not talking Krishna Katha here. This is not about talking Krishna Katha. This is about talking about all the things that is stopping us from appreciating Krishna Katha. That's what this is about, right? This is about like eradicating all of the unfavorable conditionings, psychological states, and you could say psycho-emotional melees, which distracts us from honing in perhaps on the ultimate ideal and fully opening ourselves up to ultimate reality in that way. So just brief addition. Deva, do you have any additions? How did you hear everything that we've just said?
I wanted to come back to something you said, Karuna, earlier, that if you're having an issue, an emotion, an experience, that it's likely something someone else is having. And in our community, the Bhakti community in general, just speaking to this devotee, Madhavendra Prabhu, forgive me for making an ISKCON slip. That's just my primary Sangha, but I think we've done a good job on Bodhaka of having people from different Sanghas. And this is for the whole Bhakti community. It's not just an ISKCON thing. It's not just a Hare Krishna thing. Bodhaka, my own personal inspiration for beginning it was recognizing that what they need is what we need. Those people that we're trying to reach out to and bring into the Bhakti community are struggling with and dealing with the same things that I'm dealing with in the Bhakti community. The same things Karuna's dealing with, Jai's dealing with, ladies, we're all dealing with these very real issues of being a person and having an ideal which is meant to help us transcend that humanness and enter into our real spiritual birthright. So we have this word in the Bhakti community, bridge preaching. And it's a kind of like pejorative. It's like an insult when you say someone is doing bridge preaching. It's like, yeah, you're doing something, but you're not doing the real thing. And I'm so sick of that phrasing. And that I say blow up the bridge, get rid of that whole concept, and recognize that when people are able to share their hearts in a mood of trust, that's faith. And if we're having a conversation that's deepening someone's faith, then that's Krishna Katha. That's what they need to be hearing, because that's what's going to instill in them the faith, the trust, to then accept the version of the Bhagavatam, which is accepted by someone like Jai Jagannath, yourself, myself, whomever is in that community of sharing. So that's the value of having these conversations in the Bhakti Sangha. And when I began, Bodhaka and started to make the initiative, kind of recruiting certain choice persons to be involved, my whole inspiration and purpose was so that I could meet somebody out on the street. I could give them Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita and not just have to say Hari Bol and never expect them to connect with the community ever again, because there's no safe place to do that. I wanted to have a forum, a community, an atmosphere to say, now you go here. You take this book, and when you go home and when you get on your phone in 3 minutes that you're going to do, you go here. And you'll see a whole rainbow of people and places that are expressing in different ways this bhakti ethic, this bhakti culture. And you will find yourself somewhere in that sea of faces and places, because we've organized it and curated it in such a way. And that's my hope and inspiration. We haven't done that so much yet, because our own bhakti community is in such desperate need of these honest conversations that we can't help ourselves but talk about things in a very in-house way. We can't help ourselves, but talk about ISKCON and Gaudiya Math and Prabhupada said, and we can't help ourselves right now because we're still so congested in our own social dynamic. We're still so insular, and I'll use the word pejoratively, cultish, that we can't have normal human conversations with good, upstanding people yet. But I want to get there, at least personally. And I want those around me to be able to have those conversations, because that's what will really change the way the world around us perceives our movement, not as just some obscure group of escapists who sing a nice song and cook good food, but a real force of social change that's able to actually take care of the world as our books tell us we should be capable of doing.
Drop the mic.
Krishna.
We're taking God to everyone, all walks and shapes. The Lord loves everyone, including those who watch porn.
Yay.
I just wanna come up here to a comment from Gopi Jivana. He was saying, it has been mentioned that the recent episodes have triggered certain people who have more orthodox viewpoints. I'm not sure if that is a fair way of framing it. Those who have felt uneasy with how recent topics have been approached do not at all fit into this particular small box. I think one can be in a hugely progressive and open-minded camp and still be uneasy with the approach that has been taken to certain viewpoints on sex. Yes, we must be honest about how men fail to succeed in their pursuits. Unfortunately, we can't see the rest of the comment. Perhaps Gopi, if you could just kind of paste that in two parts, we could share the rest of it and keep talking about.
Send him a link. Maybe we can get him on.
Yeah, we can bring him on. Oh yeah, that's right. If anyone wants to come on and really air out something more, we'll send you the link and invite you on the show. So we were supposed to mention that at the beginning. I guess we forgot. I like to say the word orthodox definitely wasn't a precise way of putting it. It was just for efficiency. I said the word orthodox, but so totally acknowledging that point that he's putting up there.
Okay, he's a dear friend of mine. I'm gonna send him the link right now. Gopi, if you feel inclined, please come join us and just share your heart. All right. Okay, let's just take a moment. Where are we right now exactly?
I got booted off from my computer when we were just exploring how do we see ourselves now and what's happening with the podcast right now. That's what we're kind of.
I shared, I'm hoping that one day we can give this to the guy on the street and he comes in and sees something exciting and relatable and refreshing, and it's also serving the inside community. What they need is what we need. But right now it's still very much internal, because there's a lot of work to do around here before we can really start with our heart inviting people again to the Bhakti Sangha. If we're honest with ourselves, we are scared to invite people into this situation.
Oh, right? Facts.
We are scared. We're not preaching, not because we don't want to preach. It's joyful to share joy, but it's not so joyful to share anxiety and fear and resentment and frustration. All things which are present in the Bhakti community right now, more so than they need to be, because of the failures of the institution to create this honest atmosphere. So we have to do it.
Yeah, I also wanted to comment a little bit about like the discomfort with the approach. You know, whether you have an orthodox way of thinking or a more progressive way of thinking, there were those who feel uncomfortable with their approach. I mean, I just feel like there's two things with that. Not that this can't be explored, how we might refine the nature of our approach, but no matter how much you refine an approach, there's going to be someone out there, or a lot of someone's out there, who don't appreciate the nature of a particular approach.
Yeah.
And so how are you supposed to satisfy, especially on the digital media space? Like before, you were just like in your community, so you had to deal with the criticism of like 20 people. Now you put it on the digital universe, and you got to deal with the criticism of like 300 people.
Most of them you
never met, that have nothing to do with you, and so you don't even know exactly where they're coming from. You know, and everyone always reframes their criticism as constructive. And I don't doubt that, like, if someone's making some really good, reasonable points, I like to try to give the benefit of the doubt that there might be something here that we need to look at. But still, at the end of the day, you can't. How are you supposed to process 300 critiques, you know, from people you don't know? So at the end of the day, for me, when it comes to like approach, for me, it's like we're calling it the Honest Man's Podcast, which was actually Dave Madhava's suggestion. We actually wanted to call it the Arise, the Heroic Man's Podcast, because we intended that to be like a call to heroism, like rise up, step up, stand up, and like come into your true potential. But we went with honesty, which was also, we had to put it to our Srimad Bhagavatam Man Sangha, and everyone decided on the honesty. For me, it seems like our approach is that the conversation should be as honest or devoid of pretense as possible. And if that was achieved, it was a good episode. Now, like I said, I don't necessarily agree with everything that's coming on, everything that everyone is saying, or, you know, before, even in the future, I may not agree with everything. But if it was devoid of pretense and it was honest, and it was like their own journey with a particular something, then I was like, that's a good episode. I don't think I have to agree with I don't think I have to agree. Yeah, I guess I don't believe that there's a such thing as like a right approach. You know, there's like maybe a right approach at the moment that might be able to be argued, but in a like very uniform sense, a right approach, I don't sit well with that. Like I really had a hard time with ISKCON and our like, you know, evangelist spirit talking about this is how you're supposed to preach. I'm like, I'm an individual. I may do it this way. Someone else do it another way. Like, who said that this is the right way? The right way is a way that's effective. And that's say for me with this sort of show, the right way is the way that is got the least amount of pretense involved in the conversation. For me, that seemed like a good success. That's kind of my response to like the right approach, or we didn't agree with the approach. It's like, yeah, but okay, so we need to look at that, but I don't know if we can, you know, be able to have the power to answer all of those critiques in that particular way.
Absolutely. Yeah, Deva, you wanted to contribute something?
Jai's statement there reminds me of a phrase I tell myself often, that if everyone likes you, no one can love you. If you're always trying to pander to everyone else, you'll never know who you are personally. And when you just shared, Jai, that the Off the Altar podcast was inspired as a kind of reactionary thing to some, you know, other posts that you made, I thought that was wonderful. And when you know, Bodhaka, right. Bodhaka should not be the only platform for, you know, kind of authentic, deinstitutionalized presentations of Krishna conscious culture. Most of the presentations of Krishna conscious culture should be deinstitutionalized. Mahaprabhu never started a temple. Bhaktivinoda Thakur had the Bhakti Riksha system, which was how your home could become your temple. Your home is your space, and people see who you are when they go inside of it, not who the religion is. They see who you are. That's how this culture is meant to be moving across the globe. And we need so many more people to arise and start presenting their honest experience. Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana Mukta Sangasya Jayate. When you present and share and remind yourself of that honest experience, Vijnan, that true connection you've had with Bhagavan, that's what brings mukti. That's what brings liberation. And Bodhaka, Bodhayantas Parasparam, that's what brings Tushyanti and Ramanti, pleasure and happiness also. So we need everybody to be doing this, whether it's on Bodhaka or somewhere else. And that's preaching.
Yeah.
Looks like we got Gopi Jivana here, huh?
Oh, cool.
Yes. Haribol.
Haribol. Thank you for having me, Prabhu. I appreciate it. This is my room. I work from my room. Sorry for the background.
It's beautiful.
It's all good, bro. It's all good. Yeah, so just just give us the essence of your point. I guess you put some time into articulating your comment. I don't know if you want to read that to us or if you just want to kind of like convey the essence of it.
I don't have to read the whole comment, but so the part that you read was saying that, you know, I was saying that it's not just the orthodox type of person that might have some grievance with some of the narratives in recent episodes. So the point is, we have to do away with the stigma. We have to do away with the atmosphere of guilt and shame. No doubt, I'm 100% on board. But perhaps there's a fear from some devotees that in that process, you end up shifting the goalpost. If you want to use like a football or soccer metaphor, you shift the goalpost. Now, do you want to shift the goalpost, or do you just want to tell the Prabhu, the man, you know, you missed with your goal kick, but that's okay. You can try again. You can keep training, or however you want to put it. But shifting the goalpost, that might be the problem. So when a guest comes on and they make a statement that is arguably perpendicular to some of the statements, narratives of the acharyas, it's perpendicular to the flow of some of the main statements, some of the standards that acharyas have recommended, then there's just a certain responsibility, maybe, from Bodhaka's side to be clear on if they're in agreement or not. Now, I think the way Jay has been speaking about it specifically, it's obvious that for Jay that you can have a guest on and you want them to be free to speak without judgment. And it's obvious that you're not always in agreement with what they're going to say, but it's not, unfortunately, always obvious to the viewers. If something is said and there's no particular response from you as the hosts, many people might assume you're in agreement. And that's where it gets tricky. And that's where one has to be careful and feel responsible in how things are represented. It's a tricky thing to balance. That's just kind of the idea I wanted to share, because maybe what happens is there might be an audience member who thinks that, oh, okay, what you're saying is that, you know, ultimately certain goals are not achievable for certain people. And I don't think that's the message we want to convey at the end of the day. We want everyone to, number one, feel comfortable with wherever they're at, but number two, also to have hope and be inspired and have determination and enthusiasm that anyone can reach, you know, a certain stage of bhakti, because that's the process we have. That's the magic of the process. So finding that balance, that's just kind of an idea I wanted to share. By the way, I also just want to make it clear, like, that I love everything you guys do. And Deva Madhava Prabhu was speaking about bridge preaching. So, you know, think about our acharyas. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj had a whole theme park set up so that people could just come and see the dioramas. So I think it's the only way to go is to bring it to the people and present it nicely. Anyone who thinks otherwise, well, my opinion humbly is that they have not contacted the mercy of Mahaprabhu. Anyway.
Jai.
Thank you. Does anyone want to respond to that? Deva?
I appreciate that comment. And I guess as my own concern that I feel around this need to always bring up the standards, so to speak, is that there's a subtle irony there in losing sight of the actual goal. Our actual prayojana in our process is not to follow the four regulative principles. However strictly that might be going on, the standard is to become an ecstatic lover of God, somebody that's overwhelmed by the desire to serve Krishna. And in that feeling of being overwhelmed, there's no time or energy or interest to look at the other stuff. And I've seen so often in our communities, people become crushed by that shame and guilt of not being able to follow the material standard. And therefore, they totally lose sight of the actual goal of the spiritual development of attraction to Krishna. And so that like insistence on always bringing up that which we all have heard so many times already is for me a little bit. I'm okay with letting it slide once in a while. Like, because so many people have gone away because we've beaten people over the head with it. I don't think so many people are going to go away if we don't like insert the concern every time a red flag, so to speak, comes up.
Absolutely. I just also want to add here that I feel at the very, very core of our mission of outreach should be a mood of acceptance. And unfortunately, I feel almost like the objective reality of having a certain very sort of like rigid standard for how to attain the ultimate goal is that if someone is not able to completely surrender to that particular mandate, then by default they are going to feel stifled and shameful and everything. So I feel like let's rather make the emphasis on accepting people, you know, our sort of standards of initiation. I mean, everyone knows, guys, you know, like everyone knows what the thing is, you know. And then just another point on that is we I'm just gonna mute Gopi. I'm just muting you because I just hear some background noise. It's just that, you know, there are people that have criticized, especially when Nakul came onto the podcast, and also actually in Abhi's case, that have criticized the content of certain things that were stated without having heard the entire episode and without having listened to who is the person. Like, I feel like we tend to get so caught up on the contents of what is being said, and we pay so little attention to who is the person that is saying the thing, right? Like, don't get caught up on the content of what's being said. Like, think about why it's being said from that person's perspective and wherever they're at in their journey and their life. You know, this is something that I do in my coaching work, is I tell people when there's conflicts, don't get caught up on the contents of what the other person is telling you. Don't take it personally. Look at the unexpressed need underneath what they're saying to you. You know, so I feel like really just making this super, super personal. That is really at the core of it.
I wanted to say, wait, Deva Madhava, you may have something.
Go for it, Jack.
I wanted to say, I totally resonate with this because if you have heard the episode with Abhimanyu, I kept kind of emphasizing that I do have a more orthodox, and again, that's not the best word, but a more orthodox way of viewing a lot of these subject matters, because that's just the life that I've lived in the context. But when it comes to guidance towards the standard, now if we're taking the standard as Krishna consciousness, you know, param drishta nivartate, that's like the standard. Then the means of moving to that standard when you're dealing with your materiality needs to be customized. And institutional thinking has kind of decustomized the process by stripping away the intimate relationship that a disciple and guru should ideally be having with each other. You know, no tea, no shade, but like the disciples course, I have all sorts of issues with that. I'm not gonna even go there right now because I'm probably gonna get called out for this. But
you can go to my Facebook page to see mine.
I think my main issue with the Disciples Course content, at least, especially when it was first coming out, I don't know what it is like now, but it kind of, you know, to protect in case of future fall downs. And that was definitely a motivation, because we asked the person who came up with this thing, we sent him an email and asked him what was his motivation, because I had an intuition about it, not naming any names. But they said because 50% of gurus in our movement fall down, therefore, just in case, we're putting together
a terms of agreement.
So that was just like, I was just like, wow, no words. So anyway, when you look at it traditionally, the relationship between a guru and disciple there was more intimacy there, I imagine. And a guru had the freedom to sort of customize the process for the disciple as he's moving toward the standard, which is Krishna consciousness. So what we've often mentioned on Arise, that we kind of hope that we could bring up issues around the intersection between basically materiality and spirituality, and the issues that don't get to be discussed. Now, following the four regular principles is part of the material domain of that intersection. And a guru, ideally, or someone who's giving guidance, ideally has the responsibility of helping individuals go through those different processes in very different and unique ways. In fact, I already know that this is going on. I know people who've gotten initiated, but before they took initiation, they went to their gurus and was like, yo, I can't do this, I can't do that. And the guru was like, no problem, I'm gonna initiate you by your bhajan kriya a Narchana Vritti will take place. Not that your Narchana Vritti should be well accomplished, then you can do nice bhajan. But in the public eye, it was like, I agree to follow the 4 regular principles. I agree to chant 16 rounds. But behind closed doors, there was like a more customized approach, which is the healthiest approach. So I do agree with what you're saying. We have to be careful that we don't de-emphasize, let's say, certain standards that our acharyas put in place. But when we say our acharyas, we really mean Srila Prabhupada here, because the issues that we're dealing with, that we're talking about on our show, relates to the material part, actually, largely. And how one is to deal with that material part, I don't think it's fair or proper to say there's a uniform standard and how that part should be addressed. You know, Srila Prabhupada, we hear stories of like him telling Sham Sundar, smoke 1 cigarette at a time. And then gradually, you know, you hear stories like this. Now, that process for Sham Sundar Prabhu was very fast. For some of us, our process would be maybe a little bit slower. And those who give mentorship or guidance in the future have to feel empowered enough to be able to customize their guidance for the person that they're dealing with when they're dealing with them. And so I think to have people on the show who give different perspectives about how they're dealing with the materiality doesn't really shift the standard at all, because we're not talking about Tattva Siddhanta yet. You know, or that's like, if I have a plan to have guests on about theology. So when you're talking about like theology and Abhideya Tattva, then you're going to have more like a strict, this is the Siddhanta. When you're dealing with materiality, I don't exactly think that's fair. Of course, we got to save face when we're in ISKCON, when we're in public. You know, I agree to follow the 4 regular principles, this, that, and other. I'm down with that, but that's, you know, I'm down for meeting status quo, like when in Rome, be like the Romans. But if we're going to have an honest conversation about the issues that impact me at that intersection, particularly on the material domain side, well, let's talk about it honestly. Yeah. And maybe someone has a suggestion that's just like, well, Prabhupada didn't say that. I know. But Prabhupada not dealing with you. I'm dealing with you. Or, you know, or like that. The guru is dealing with us. So anyway, I wanted to say I hear that point. I actually resonate with that point quite a bit. I'm a little bit of a stickler for, you know, precision and accuracy when it comes to our philosophy. Anyone who associates with me knows that about me. It's actually an annoyance sometimes, because it kind of sometimes stops the free flow of things. So I fully hear that point. And I'm also just opening my heart to just like, when people are dealing with material stuff, there may be different approaches that affect in different ways. Anyway, I've said there.
I'd like to share one more thing along what Jai is going, and then Gopi would like to hear from you again, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Jai is opening up a can of worms there with the guru discussion. And I
don't really want to go there.
I know. I'll say this, that if you look at our society in general, the bhakti community, and then specifically ISKCON, most of the issues that we're facing, and there's a particular issue right now that everybody's in a kerfuffle about. If you really want to solve the issue, then you stop institutionally approving gurus. You stop that practice, which is not done anywhere else in our Gaudiya community. And then you remove all of the tension that is unnecessary and force people to deal with the tension that Krishna wants you to deal with when you take a spiritual master. You can't remove tension, but you can have unnecessary tensions, and unnecessary tensions create unnecessary experiences of anger, frustration, fear, resentment, all the stuff that we see too much of. So we'll put that aside now, and I'll go back to what you said.
I know, I'm like, bro, you about to get us in more trouble.
I'm the CEO. It's okay. I can say this. I'll take it. You guys. Anyway, so Gopi, you brought up this point that, you know, our acharyas and the standard, and Jai did a good job of addressing it. But I would also like to point out that, and Karuna made this idea of like seeing the person. There's Prabhupada in his books, and then there's Prabhupada who dealt with his disciples very personally. And if you talk to his disciples, they will tell you that he often told them something different from what they expected, something different from what they had read in the purport or heard in the class. And the lack of, or the laziness of the institution in providing that personalized experience for everyone, right? And permitting that's how it's supposed to be. That means otherwise we'll just read the books. What's the point of the people if we can just read the books and it's already there? So it's actually fundamentally undermining the mercy of our Guru Varga if we just kind of parrot the standard. We like to say in ISKCON that the Prabhupada's books are the law books for the next 10,000 years. Anyone on this call ever read a law book?
No.
Okay. So something else is necessary also. And Prabhupada provided that something else for his disciples. He encouraged his capable disciples to provide that for their godbrothers and godsisters. And that kind of living encouragement is not as nearly as present in our bhakti communities in general, but especially in ISKCON, as it needs to be.
Dude, I'm gonna have to increase the force on this fan because this fire is too much.
Gopiji, would you like to add anything, Prabhu?
I can add a few thoughts, just things that have been swirling around in my mind since listening to Jay and Deva Madhava speaking. So there's one word I think that encapsulates how everything should proceed from here on forward. I mean, I'm not trying to be presumptuous.
That's our last topic. So you're giving us a good transition point.
Yeah, we take it.
No, well, so the word I'm thinking of is patience. You guys have to have patience with your audience. And applause to you. Here you are doing the episode addressing all the feelings that people have. So you're showing the patience 100%. And your audience has to have patience with you guys, patience with themselves even. And there just needs to be calm and clear communication. What are you guys doing? There are different kinds of conversations. That's what Deva indicated. You get the type where you stand on a soapbox on the corner of the street and you proclaim things. And then you get a room conversation. And this podcast is clearly the latter type of conversation. So I guess over time, the audience will get to realize that there's a certain context here, and be patient and understand that it's a certain type of conversation, and that you guys are not trying to make proclamations about how the law books should be changed.
Jai.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Really good.
And thank you for being willing to come on with, the Purva Paksha, so to speak. We were wondering if anybody would be so brave, and it's very kind of.
Yeah, when Deva Madhava suggested this, we bring guests on. I said, I love the idea. It's a sort of digital say it to my face.
But yeah, Gopi did it so lovingly and benevolently, and we're really, really grateful for that. So thank you so much for coming on and joining us, Prabhu.
Jai, thank you.
Well, that might be a good transition point to the last thing that I have here before we maybe look at some of the other questions if there's something to look at. But the last thing I had here for our conversation is, how do we see ourselves going into the future? Like, what's our brand, and how do we want to approach that? I have my suggestions. It's really general, not general. It's kind of specific actually, but what I have here on my notebook is I would hope to curate content in such a way that there's information for boys, like young men. There's information for husbands, and there's information for fathers, how they show up to themselves and to their relationships in a spiritual way. Because like I said, I would like to, in the future, make it possible that other spiritually minded men and women would be interested to hear these sorts of conversations. So I feel like if we have a responsibility that we need to articulate for ourselves looking into the future, part of that responsibility, maybe not the whole thing, is providing information, conversations that address boys, husbands, and fathers. For me, I'm not going to be a father in this life. I'm not going to be a husband, but I do see like fatherhood, particularly as the pinnacle of what it means to be a man, as far as the material domain of the issue is concerned. Otherwise, we're spiritual souls. We're kind of like androgen in nature. even the mind in a sense is like androgen. It's like in a sense, like, you know, you have like Carl Jung, I think he calls it anima and animus. There's like a masculine part of the psyche, there's a feminine part of the psyche. But when you have this physical body of a man or woman, then you really need to integrate that part of the psyche that matches that physical body and manifests a lot of that energy in your relationships. So I do see in the future us discovering the people, the information, the conversations that can help boys, you know, become ultimately husbands, boys to men, boys to men, to husbands, and then ultimately to fathers, because we need, you know, that's going to be required for healthy communities. And please don't come at me with the, well, what about the women part? Totally, absolutely. This is not that show.
That's my job. Come at me with that and volunteer.
Okay. So
Yeah,
that's kind of how I see the future.
Yeah. That's excellent, Jai. I really appreciate that. But just kind of like on this kind of on this thing of like, why are women being excluded, or, you know, getting that kind of feeling perhaps. I would just like to read the comment that Janavi made on Deva's post a little bit earlier today, where she said that I've enjoyed and very much appreciated some of the recent episodes. I applaud these types of discussions. One thing I wonder is, if they're taking place on a public forum anyway, why is it a man's podcast? This isn't expressed with indignance, rather just that I have found the topics today to be mostly relevant to all genders. Now, this is the whole point, is that whatever is good for us as men is by default good for you as women. It's one thing. Like, what we talk about for our own advancement and for getting our stuff together is so that we can better show up in our relationships to women, and so that we can, you know, it's like, I feel like it's such a, it's really just the same thing. And whatever we discuss here, I feel these discussions between men, and it's not like it's only between men, you know, we've had various female guests, incredible devotees, come onto the show and bring their perspective. So by no means do we in any way, you could say, like, fundamentally exclude women from our discussions. We don't exclude them as guests. We don't exclude them as, you know, their energy being a part of our discussions in general. By no means do I feel like women are being excluded in any way. And yeah, I just but at the same time, with that being said, it's also like, there are certain conversations that are very kind of like unique to men, and that need to be had amongst men for the sake of our betterment ultimately. And I think that it's actually a really great service to be having it on this public forum, where it is accessible to women, so that y'all can know what's up, you know, and be aware of what right, exactly. So anyway, that's just
when in some of our very first episodes, just augmenting a little part of what you said, Karuna, I had several women reach out to me, legit telling me, I did not know that this stuff goes on and like the men's inner world. Right. And I got one message where a wife, she was saying, this really kind of helps me to reframe some of the energy that I'm bringing to my husband, because I'm not aware that this is the sort of stuff that the struggle that y'all encounter. And so she was just sent me like a private message, was super appreciative of the podcast because of putting that out there. I think also in response to Janavi's question, the other element, I just mentioned it, but the physical body, like the biological body, is like man or woman. We can't budge from that one. We do believe in two genders, man or woman. But the psychological body is kind of androgen, you know, because it's been in so many types of bodies. So it has impressions from all the variety of bodies that it's inhabited. And so it has sort of this androgen nature. And therefore, I guess it's Carl Jung psychology. I think, anyway, he's given it this language that there's like an animus side and an anima side. And I think the anima side is like the masculine side of the psychology. The animus side is the woman side of the psychology. So all men and women have both parts in them, according to this view, which makes sense to me. And a lot of the work that a man or woman has to do is integrating it, the opposite side. You know, at least previously that was the work. Now with all the gender confusion, it's a mess right now. But previously it was like, okay, I have a man body. The anima side would be very dominant. I need to learn how to integrate the animus side in a way that it makes me a more complete and healthy individual. What we're seeing in the modern world is that you have because they put more emphasis on the psychological body and they kind of just dismiss altogether the physical body. Men have not been able to integrate that masculine energy very effectively. I mean, I feel that personally, we're not embodied very well. And especially when you're in a culture that tells you that men are toxic and dangerous and this and that, we've not been very comfortable with being embodied in male bodies.
Sure what it would look like.
Say that again?
We're not even sure what it would look like in a healthy way.
Exactly. We're not even sure. So a lot of, again, this is coming back to the beginning of the episode, a lot of the motivations is discovering the people and the conversations and the information that will help us discover that anima side and integrate that in a better and healthy way. Not to dismiss the animus side, not the feminist side. I feel like we got a lot of that. In fact, I feel like we got too much of that. Honestly, when we went to school, I was raised by a woman. Most of my teachers were women. I was into women, how you say, superheroes and all that. I think I got way too much of the feminine side. I didn't get enough of the masculine side. And it has nothing to do with just sexuality, but just practically the culture, the way that it is. And so if some of our topics seem super universal, honestly, that is something that I would want to correct actually a little bit in the future. Not that, again, I think a lot of topics are naturally universal when you're dealing with the inner world of a person, but I would want to be able to discover something that's more precisely addresses that masculine side of the psyche. So it comes off like, okay, they're really talking about like masculine psychology here. And so that for me, I actually heard it as a feedback of how to make it sound less universal so that it could be clear that this is also something that's very important for the show. Again, not that dismisses the universality. Anything dealing with the inner world is going to have a lot of universal and uniform elements to it. But that's kind of how I heard it, as almost like a feedback that we need to really discover the people, the conversations, and the information that can really zoom in on that aspect a little bit.
I'll speak to Bodhaka rather than Arise specifically, since you Prabhu shared some wonderful aspirations for Bodhaka, and you're already trending in that direction just by your dedication and what's been done already. The hope that I've always had for something like, I remember sitting and I was actually paying attention in my japa. It was like one of those times when I was really actually hearing the name as much as I have the capacity, especially 8-9 years ago. I was really trying to focus, and just something came in, this idea for this need for a website, which was thisforbliss.com. That just like popped in, and I wrote it down in my little japa journal thing. And this seed of a desire, of a need, a sense of a online space where the devotee community and those that we're trying to connect to can come and witness for themselves the beauty of bhakti is not there right now. And I had that sense of a need for it. And it's taken this long to get to just a few podcasts, spread over a Facebook page. We're swimming upstream in Kali Yuga. It's difficult, but we do have aspirations. And Bodhaka 5 years from now, I'm hoping that it's the kind of space where anybody from any part of the world, if they're a thoughtful person, they feel the need, they feel a compunction, a responsibility themselves to get the perspective of the bhaktas. on issues of their existence, not only spiritual, but as a man, what do I need to be thinking about? As a woman, what do I need to be thinking about? As somebody who has an impact on the environment around me, as somebody who's working in a job, as someone who's raising children, what do I need to be thinking about? These bhaktas have a perspective that's valuable. This is what it means to have a Brahminical influence on the world, not to overthrow the planet's governments, but to get the planet's governments to recognize that a perspective rooted in Krishna consciousness is essential for healthy dynamics of all kinds, both material and ultimately spiritual. And I want Bodhaka to be that platform that they feel comfortable to come connect to without having to take on the institutional expectations that many other things will probably continue to put on them. So that's my hope. And the seed is right there in the Bhagavad Gita, Bodhayantas parasparam, tusyanti cha ramanti cha. The only place that Krishna talks about happiness in the whole book is this verse, chapter 10, text 9. How do you become happy? Which is the concern of the whole world, whether they're ready to admit it or not. How do they become happy? By this bodhayantas, by this sharing their realizations with each other about the absolute truth. So we want this to be a platform for that. We want many more variegated presentations, but the authenticity that we have of the present batch of Bodhaka representatives is essential. So we're not going to expand it without being able to maintain that authenticity that devotees like yourselves are bringing. And I'm totally indebted to you guys for being the vanguards of the whole situation. 37 episodes and counting. It's laudable, and I'm again just indebted to you for letting me be a part of what you're doing.
Well, Prabhu, thank you for letting us be a part of what you're doing.
Sure, it's my honor.
Jai, no, that's really, really well said. If there's anyone that has any kind of really pressing point of concern, any point of appreciation, anything that you'd like to share, if you'd like to pop on and join us briefly, we would appreciate that. You could just indicate in the comments and I'll send you the link. That's one thing. And then kind of just moving ahead in the conversation, I think we can definitely give a bit of an idea of like coming attractions, just kind of where we're seeing things going in the near future, certain things that we're building up to, and then also we have a few announcements to make and things to do like that. But we're still very much here ready to continue the conversation, so if anyone would like to contribute, please let us know.
Okay, where are the coming attractions while we're waiting?
Yes. Okay, so next week we're going to be having a really amazing couple join us on the show, Abai Charan and his wife. I'm not familiar with her name. What is her name, Jai?
Ashley.
Oh, okay. So Abai and Ashley are going to be joining us, and
I really like them. That's why I'm
what's
smiling.
What's funny? What's funny?
Nothing's funny. I'm smiling because I really like them.
Yeah,
Abai's one of my favorite people. So
Abai is so cool.
He's
Meet his wife.
No, they're amazing. They've been, I think they've been married for like 12, 15 years or something. They have like 5 kids and they're super young. They're only like around 30. And yeah, just super amazing couple. So they'll be coming on for conscious relationships. And then also one thing that I would just like to remind everyone of is that we're in a process of conducting some research around devotees' sexual values. We're kind of building up to have a particular episode in which we're going to get very real about what we've discovered about where people are at. We're going to share what we found out, and just really open up that conversation about what is actually going on behind closed doors, not in explicit detail, but just like how devotees are really feeling, particularly of the younger generation and certain struggles that are there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to post the link to our questionnaire in the comments. If anyone would still like to check it out and maybe just make that contribution, we would really appreciate that. So that is in the comments. And then we also just have an announcement that our dear friend Nakul is going to be doing a really awesome workshop this coming weekend on sexuality for women. Like, what is sexuality really about from the female perspective? How to
A
navigate.
female reached out to him to do that. Just want to throw that out there.
Yes, a devotee lady reached out to him, just out of concern for sexual issues that ladies also tend to face universally. So Nakul is going to be doing that workshop this coming weekend. I will post. I'll post this link in the comments as well if anyone is interested in joining Nakul this coming weekend. Any ladies would like to get benefited in that particular way, that's also in the comments right now. And then just one last thing, when this is done being posted, is please also sign up for our Brajananda is asking, is that for women? Yes, it's exclusively for women, just so that everyone knows. However, we will also be hosting Nakul Prabhu again very soon for a semen retention mastery workshop again in our Discord community. So that's going to be coming up quite shortly again as well. And then we would also just like to we'd like to request everyone to sign up for our newsletter as well. That would be, I think we have a bit of a pause in that regard right now, but we're still working on solidifying everything and making every aspect of what we do completely consistent. We've been lucky that the podcast itself has been continuing on the weekly, but yeah, the links there, ariseman.net, and we're just really grateful that all of you are here, because without you so enthusiastically listening and participating in this endeavor, what would be the use of any of this? So just thank you so much, everyone, for the support. And please share, please share with any of your friends that you feel could benefit from these discussions. Yeah. I think that's kind of like a bit of housekeeping that I'd like to put out there for now. Jai, if you have any, I don't know, Jai always surprises me with all kinds of epic ideas for things that we are going to do in the future. So if there's any coming attractions in terms of episodes that you have in mind that you'd like people to know about, maybe you could.
Nope.
You could.
Not so much. After our conscious relationship episode, we do have a Ayurvedic guest. He'll be our first non-devoted guest. Non-devoted means he's not a Krishna bhakta, but he's a Ayurvedic doctor for a long time. And apparently very good at what he does. So I'm kind of looking forward to that, because that's kind of the first time we're opening the field up to an interesting conversation with someone who's not a devotee but has much to offer. Very strict, apparently, with his sadhana, goes to sleep at 8, wakes up for Brahma Muhurta, has his own spiritual practice. So I'm kind of looking forward to that conversation, just because it's showing like, look, devotees, we can't actually interface with people outside our community without it being like you're bogus and have nothing to offer. I'm kind of looking forward to that.
Jai, you also like had such a dope name for that episode. What was it again?
It's called, we're going to call it Poor Digestion and the Loss of Sovereignty. Because Ayurveda deals with digestion of food, digestion of emotions, and digestion of knowledge, which I didn't know until I saw Nam Ras podcast with Prahladananda Swami. So poor digestion and the loss of sovereignty, the two are connected. So I'm really looking forward to that episode. Thank y'all so much I hope this clarifies for our audiences our intentions. They are very sincere. They're obviously not perfect. So speaking to Gopa Jivana's point, please be patient with us. And if you're patient with us, we'll definitely reciprocate that energy. If you're not patient with us, we'll try not to be so much reciprocal with that. But we're only humans, so don't count us out for doing something crazy. So yeah, just be patient with us. And we're still growing this brand, growing this podcast, trying to figure out what its potential could be. But so far the journey's been very sweet and wonderful, and we really, really, really do thank you all for encouraging us by showing up. Like, this was such a well-engaged podcast today, for just us, and which means that the topic was important for many of you. So we hope to have more of the same in the future, and just thank you so much for that.
Jai. And I am
No
also I'm also posting the our email address in the comments, ariseheroicman@gmail.com. If you have any more kind of personal, specific, tailored suggestions for how we can take this endeavor forward, any feedback that you may have, any appreciation, we would love to hear from you. Deva Madhava Prabhu, any concluding points?
Go Ranga.
Nityananda.
Jaya.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hadi, hadi.